Sweet.
Yeah. So I met two guys here in the DC area that are actually burners. Um, and we had met before, a mutual friend, actually through Clarice, and then decided to do like a follow-up catch up. We did that yesterday, and one of the things that we were talking about for a long time was organized religion. Yeah, I know, funny topic, like easy topic, right? But made me think a lot about the stuff that we talk about in this on our podcast here, and particularly it was about modern day, like commercialized religion. So the lead in for the conversation was that the Mormon Church was the fastest growing religion over the past like X couple of years. Like when you, again, it's always so fun to measure rate, right? Over like net total, whatever, like rate of change is always interesting. Yeah, and they're just killing it apparently. I haven't looked up the numbers myself. The first is the Mormons and the second are the Pentecostals. And then so when you start to like look at those organizations and how they are just more like corporations, but with like the most strong mission statement you can imagine and the most alignment of principles and values you can imagine,
like
but they work like a corporation.
Yeah, their core purpose is pretty fucking clear.
Yeah. And it also came out of this one story that they had this mutual friend who apparently this guy, I feel like is a very interesting trait, but he just like likes to attend random religious services. And for a lot of these services, if you are a newcomer, like every single after as soon as the ceremony is finished, every single person in the church will come and talk to you and introduce themselves, introduce them to your family. Like it's a part of the conversion, right? It's a part of like the whole thing. And so I don't know. That was quite interesting. And one of the guys, Matt, made a point where like both Mormonism and Scientology, to a degree, have like moderated themselves over the past couple of years, right? There was this time for sure where they like spiked in the public consciousness as like quote unquote like Scientology for sure as like an existential threat, right? As a cult. Tom Cruise was like, dancing on Oprah's couch and all that stuff. But they all kind of just like faded back into the background, right? And it's almost scary in that sense that like you have this entity that is just, it's probably the most agile thing that exists in this world. If you think about an entire organization group of people in an organic sense, right? Like in a hive kind of sense. I don't know. So I think we talk a lot about like individual versus collective, and how to like mobilize a set in a lot of ways. So I thought it's always interesting how people get captivated. So,
do you know anyone that's like deep into any of those religions? Maybe not the mainstream ones, but like let's say the ones that are spreading. I guess like Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, I guess Scientologists. They all seem to have, and I think even like Catholicism and stuff, they all have a proponent of like, it's like programmed into the individual that you must spread this, or at the very least defend it, like, to the grave. Not like technically to the grave, I guess in some cases, but you either spread this or you like, if somebody attacks it or says something bad about it, you have to defend the fuck out of it.
So what's interesting? I think that line that you said has been walked back, which is precisely the reason why so many of these religions are popular now, right? Like because they've moderated their position. I have worked with a couple of Mormons. I think that's the closest connect I have to those types of organized religions. And it's like on the surface, you just don't know if there's anything wrong with this human. Like they're just like wholly good people on the surface and not very pressuring, right? And I think that the contrast of that to the stereotype and what you'd expect in terms of like, people who are proselytizing and evangelizing, has what's made them more successful. I think even Catholicism winning the PR game a little bit with Pope Francis is because he's been moderating the Catholic position a lot more. And out of all the religious sects, like, I think Catholicism is one of the few, if not the only one, that like recognizes evolution, right? Which flies in the face of all like biblical texts and traditional Orthodox teaching. So I don't know anyone personally who's like really into it. I think I didn't bring this up in the conversation yesterday, but I think that I would like to see where Korean Christianity, that spread of Christianity, is in the ranking as well, because I think that's super fast growing, and had studied, Korean history in college. But I mean, even just from a personal anecdotal perspective, like there's like mega churches popping up all over the place here in Northern Virginia. I don't know if you noticed. They look like stadiums. They're actually not very ornate or decorated from the outside. They look like kind of commercial stadium buildings. But then once you inquire a little bit more, you realize it's like a mega church. And I mean mega church, and literally like rows and rows and rows of seating that are like stacked high, right? So
yeah, I think, I mean, so I recently met my friend who's a Jehovah's Witness, and I've known this dude for at least a couple of years, and I never knew he was a Jehovah's Witness. And I'm not saying that's like a bad thing, like, I'm not saying that like, oh my God, I found out Jehovah's Witness, but I just didn't know how I didn't know what that meant, and I didn't know how involved he was. And I think from talking to him, it seems like if you're a Jehovah's Witness, you're just involved. Like, you're like deep in it. Like, he does at least 5 hours of like stuff a week for Jehovah's Witnesses. And like when I was Catholic, at least it was kind of like, oh man, we have to go to church for an hour every Sunday. I mean, this guy has to go preach, I think like twice a week for 2 hours each time or something. Or I might be making stuff up, but it was like 5 or 6 hours. It was like twice he has to go preach for like a couple hours at a time. And then he has like Bible study for a couple hours a week. And then I guess he has church or whatever. And preaching is like, he goes and spreads the word. So, but the interesting thing is that, because he was cool because he let me ask all these questions. And the interesting thing is, so his family grew up in it. So, I mean, he's never not had a time when he wasn't a Jehovah's Witness, because I think his dad and his family was already in the Jehovah's Witnesses beforehand. But the way it works is, it's like their entire family and their entire family is part of like this community, this religious community, and you have to do certain things to be part of that community. But if you don't do those things, then they'll kick you out, and then the people of that community are not allowed to like correspond with you. Like, they can't like talk to you anymore. And if you don't do, like, let's say you are a person of that community, let's say he decided, oh, I don't want to be a Jehovah's Witness, then his immediate family is not allowed to correspond with him. Otherwise they get kicked out too. But obviously, if your entire life is like, imagine if like, I don't know, imagine if the people of Vietnam, anyone that's Vietnamese, decided that, yo, Hack, none of us will correspond with you anymore. You know what I mean? Like, and that's something that's like been with me since I was like, born. Imagine that they're like, hey, if you don't follow like these and these things, then nobody that's Vietnamese, if they want to stay within our community, will be able to speak with you. And then let's say me and you can't be friends anymore. Otherwise, your whole family gets kicked out too. It sounded kind of like that's what I was saying. Like a lot of these religions, they have like things pre-programmed in, where it seems like it makes it so people stay in, and then people like spread the word. And I don't think I don't know that they're necessarily bad. I don't want to make it imply like that's what I'm saying, because at the end of the day, I think the intentions, at least for the individual, is always like good, or not always, mostly good when it comes to religion. I think people that enter religions and they follow a lot of these, I guess, like commandments or like core beliefs and stuff. Like a lot of the beliefs are, you know, like the Ten Commandments, or like um, they're almost like, I don't know. It's like a shared community of idealistic beliefs on how to live better.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, that's
Sure.
kind of what religion is. But yeah, they're ran like a corporation for sure. They have like their own like it sounded very well organized. It's like you know, for a couple hours a week, he has his own like little section that he has to go and preach to, and then there's other people in his area, and then they have to like hit certain quotas and, you know, things like that, and all the way down to the T.
Yeah.
And this is a religion, but also, like, you know, it's ran like a corporation. And I mean, I think there's only like 8 million Jehovah's Witnesses or something, like worldwide. But they have like, you know, they have sounds like they have like big meetups, like in certain, like, you know, like where they meet like, you know, 50,000 when we get together like in the stadium and stuff like that. And I don't know, it's just like when I was asking him these questions, I mean, it was cool because he let me like ask me questions I was curious about. uh it was like a completely different world I wasn't even aware of. And
Yeah.
yeah, I was like, hey, have you seen Book of Mormon? Um,
Yeah.
he hasn't seen it yet though, but
Yeah. Yeah. Um, no, that sparked a lot of good thought. And I think it always goes back to, again, the central themes that we talk about, which is, I think, really knowing thyself, right? Know thyself, that classic quote. Um, to understand yourself, individual, you have to start mapping, relating against the whole, what this whole is, because I mean they're indivorceable, right? Like you can't separate yourself from society, and vice versa. You can't separate society from the individual. And I think it's interesting. What'd you
go
say?
ahead. I was going to ask you
Uh,
a question, but go ahead. You had a thought.
oh, well, I was just gonna say that, like, I mean, for the longest time, arguably a majority of human history, like church and state were one, right? You know, when you think about the estates of society, there's like the state, the people, the government, you know, the church. They were synonymous in a lot of these, and I don't know how explicit it is in the Bible, which you know, you and I were raised Catholic, but I've certainly heard um, descriptions from like the Quran, for example, that are like, some texts are a little bit more explicit, and some religions are a little bit more explicit about even like economical prescriptions for how to run a society or state or a family or a community, right? How taxes should work, how certain things should work. And I mean, and so when when you think about how historically these were like entire ways of setting up a society, it's like, should come as no surprise that, like, you know, the modern day uh, instruments for it are as commercialized as they are. And it's funny because like our very country, the US, is arguably, right, based on like that Puritan model of work and religion and subsidiaries, if you will, because a lot of these religions, they are like little like Chick-fil-A franchises. I'm sorry if I'm offending anybody, but like, and that was, to be fair, it's a metaphor I lifted from my friend who we were talking about this yesterday, that like it's just so systematized, like it's in not in a neutral, not in a bad or good way. It's just like the ability, again, to replicate something as fuzzy as a set of human principles, beliefs, behaviors, and operationalize it so well. There's a whole network, and I think a lot of it too is based on, and I'll close off this point. I didn't realize, and I am admittedly not super researched in a lot of this stuff, that Mormons were actually like, that settlement had existed long before like the American territory started to expand out west. And then so there was an existential crisis. Like they did have to like kind of like defend themselves as the space expanded. And for when I think about a lot of the religions, especially the insular ones that you talked about, the small, more niche Orthodox ones, almost everything makes a ton of sense when you look at it from the lens of survival, right? Like, what are the things that you would put in place to maximize your team's survival? To go back to the team sport mentality, like having as many kids as possible is one that you would put down and make sacred, right? Like if you and I wanted to make a new religion tomorrow, Hack, right, and we were figuring out the primary commandments, one of those ones would have to be we need to make as many of our own kind as possible.
So you can't be gay.
So you can't be gay, right? And if, or, you know, and maybe like the adjustment really should be, the gameplay should be like, oh, if you are gay, that you should still have a baby, you know, and whatever. But yeah, like it's honestly, it goes back to the oldest known thing in time, which is our DNA just seeks to replicate itself. And we're just like, our DNA just like brainwashes us to find more ways to make it to replicate itself. Like, so anyway.
Yeah, religion's interesting, man. Do you feel like there's a difference between religion and spirituality, and what's your take on that? 'Cause you know, some people nowadays are like, well, I'm spiritual but not religious, and I think I fall in that category as well. So I could probably come up with an answer to that if you don't have one.
I do. I think it's just about how, like, degrees of prescriptiveness. I would put spirituality in the most general sense, right? Like an absolution of labels, like just a general exploration of kind of just like human existence as like animals, like on Earth, like straight up, right? But the thing is that we don't live actually on Earth, like the physical world, right? We live in the world of humans. We live in the world of human constructs, where love is a thing and hate, you know what I mean? Like, and so I think that's where religion starts to emerge, in the world of human constructs. And like and back to the game thing, right? Religion is a meta, it's one of the strategies in the human RPG. And so I think I see that as kind of the difference.
Like,
I think religion
is a construct and spirituality is not. Is that what you're trying to say? Or?
No, yeah, I guess that's one way of saying that. That would be one way of saying. I'd say it's just spirituality is just like, I mean, it's just completely completely generalized, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just, you know,
Is this spirituality versus religion, or is that like apples and oranges? Because I know sometimes people say science versus spirituality, and I'm like, you're not comparing the two same things.
I would say like spirituality is like the ocean, and religion's like a river. You know what I mean?
I see.
It's like a branching or segment, or a kind of a narrowing of the whole, you know, an offshoot of the whole.
Yeah, I've always felt like, because I feel like spirituality implies that you're looking more for like almost like a direct experience, like kind of like, okay, I think spirituality for me is like kind of like, you know, asking the big questions, like, you know, like about like, you know, what happens like before we're born or after we die, and what is consciousness, like how the fuck are we even here? You know, like asking those questions and looking for an answer, like almost like within yourself. Like if you're gonna meditate for a long time, maybe you'll start having a direct experience as to what your consciousness is and such like that. So it's like more of an internal thing, as opposed to religion, which is like this external, like, you know, you have like these shared communities that kind of spread like a certain word, and you're supposed to act a certain way based on like this external pressure. Religion always felt like very external to me, like it's an external way to get you to live better. spirituality feels more like an internal, like you look within yourself and then hope, maybe you'll find an answer as to how to live better. I mean, I don't know. It's very
I mean,
general, of course.
I feel like if there was a third person on this call who was biased toward religion, they would probably tell you like, that's exactly what religion is, man. I don't know what you're talking about. Like religion asks you to look inside and understand yourself, right? Make peace with you and God, whatever God is. And like, I think they're super related, for sure.
Oh man, the word God is so loaded. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have anything left to say about religion. I feel like I'm not qualified to speak on it.
I agree. I agree. I think for me personally, I think a lot of us go through those teenage adolescent years of thinking about things like religion. When you're an edgy, rebellious teenager, if you will, you're questioning all these constructs, and religion usually one of the first targets to get hit. And there's like a response to religion at that point that's very strong. But then as you get older, you start to realize it's more complicated than that. So I certainly don't want to. I'm mindful of that when I talk about religion. Like fast forward 20 years later, to not be as heavy-handed, because there's a lot there. It's been there for since the beginning of humanity, right? It's like I'm not
Right.
you and I are not going to pop into existence and like solve religion or even meaningfully contribute to that conversation.
Religion does have like a pretty I guess like when it comes to like the big questions that we're never going to be able to figure out, like what happens after we die, and what is consciousness and stuff like that. I mean, they kind of have general answers that are helpful to people. You know what I mean? Like if imagine you have like little kids and like, hey, what happens after we die? Your little 5-year-old's about to have like a existential crisis and shit, and you don't have a good answer because you don't know. It does kind of keep you sane for a little bit, until you become like that teenager that questions everything. You're like, what are you talking about, Dad?
Yeah. So this is a bit of a personal interjection here, but what I'm grappling with, and our podcast is still pretty private, otherwise I wouldn't say this so openly, but I'm grappling with the fact that my Muay Thai gym, the more I deconstruct it, is a religion, is cult-like almost, and I can map so many things to religion. Like Muay Thai, the martial art, is like God in our construct, and like our head coach is like the Pope, and a bunch of us coaches are like apostles or bishops, and we have all these little rites that like initiate you, and there's like a word of God, and it's amazing because and interesting to me because obviously, our organization's small enough and I'm in it enough to know that like, man, we do a ton of good for people, but off the vehicle of indoctrination to a degree, like the Kool-Aid has been drunk, and it's interesting. I don't know, like if you, it's like that. It's like that whole sci-fi trope of what is the cost of something good if in doing so if you're sacrificing parts of your individuality for it, right? Or you're like knowingly being kind of programmed. And I think about like military units, special units. I think about sports teams. The best teams, starting from the GM and the coach down, and the senior players and everything, have this like, we're gonna bang the drum here, and you're all gonna march to this exact beat, and you're gonna like sleep, breathe the mission. And I don't care who you are, I don't care what you think, like the team first. And that's so interesting to me because it's something that like I've always wanted to bring out, whether it's like my work, my at my job with my, you know, my team there, or a group of friends, or uh, you know, anything. It's just crazy to tap into. Um, but it also feels so. It almost feels inherently wrong or so dangerous uh, to be
Like
to
a
do
like a
to
cult.
do that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like a cult. Like, man, Clarice is watching this new cult documentary, and I walk by every once in a while and I hear the cult leader speak, and he mixes it with self-improvement. And I'm just like, whoa, that sounds so normal, but also, uh, yeah, like that would grab any person who, you know, felt like they needed that. You know, that's what they were looking for. Anyway, I digress. That's mostly so I don't know, just like a feeling. Because I think there's good there too in the fact that like my feeling diagnosis of society right now is that we're too fractured, and that like there isn't like nefarious parties have done too much of that like use this in bad ways, and like is there a way to counteract that? Like, do you have to fight fire with fire, right? Like if people are radicalized on ideologies, and some of it's just happening organically because, you know, two people that are geographically distant with fringe beliefs can like connect and amplify their voice. Um, like, do we need to make like, yeah, a tribe or a cult of goodness, a cult of reason on the opposite end? Is that the only way? Because like if someone's screaming loud, you don't beat them by like being quiet, right? Sometimes you have to scream louder, or and I
I
don't
don't know.
know.
I don't know if screaming louder works either.
Yeah, no, it's fair. I don't know. It's a conundrum. You know, I think so. Gen Z is gonna solve it for us.
Oh, you think Gen Z is the ones gonna figure it out?
No, I don't know.
I guess that's one of the problems that we're gonna be handing down to them.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think it's interesting too. Also, I've done no research into this, but um, like generational studies will be interesting. Like I think about how Gen X was kind of like lost in the noise, right? It's always boomers versus millennials, but Gen X is in between there. The oldest millennial is 40 years old now, right? So just to give a sense of where those bookends are. And then you have the Gen Z, which like, are they another kind of like sandwich generation? Is it really like what comes after Gen Z? Like I don't know. It's generations are quite interesting too, I'd say.
No, generations are definitely interesting, man. Like the environment that you grew up in, based on the like just having a cell phone or just having like Amazon or just having YouTube. Like imagine growing up with that shit when you're a child. Like me watching Leo get programmed by this. Leo is my nephew. He's 3.
Mhm.
Watching him get programmed by the algorithm is kind of insane. I mean, I'm watching adults get programmed by the algorithm. I'm watching myself get programmed by the algorithm. You know what I mean? I'm watching like society as a whole almost. You know, everyone in there. And I'm sure I'm in my own individual silo as well. You know, and my friend group's probably in a similar silo. That's why we're friends. But watching the algorithm of Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, like whatever, just kind of like program our beliefs. Um, at least we can remember a time when that wasn't as much the case. You know, when information didn't spread so fast that you didn't have like silos the way that we have them now, and so many of them. You know, when the only way we all got our information was, you know, the 10 o'clock news. Um, and then even when the beginning of the internet came out, it wasn't like the way it is now. Um, it would be like those news channels just have websites now. You go to CNN.com or, you know, whatever. And it wasn't as polarized. You know, CNN.com for us growing up was not like CNN.com now, where it's like, you know, just like liberal, like the Fox News of liberal side.
Yeah.
I think like news stations were actually more like um, uh, trying to be objective.
Yeah.
But now it's more like trying to speak to the base of their audience, you know, the types of people that would click on this link, and you want to make them click on the link like 10 more times. So you're going to have to, you know, say something that's provocative to that specific group. And if you don't, then perhaps your organization ceases to exist. Because like if there's like all this noise and there's all this information, I mean, and naturally I do it, you do it too. Like, you know, you're gonna click on a link that's like provocative. You're not gonna click on the one that's like, listen to me, I'm the voice of reason, you know, like,
Absolutely, man. And it makes me think about, again, we talked about how, given the things that we like to talk about, the concepts we like to talk about, there's always the follow-up "so what" question. Like, what can we do about it? Like, I think everyone is at this point well aware that the horses are completely out of the gate, right? There's no getting them back in. Pandora's box is open. Like, we have this powerful thing called social media, with engagement metrics. You know, smash that like, comment, subscribe, you know, to kind of vote. But I think more than ever, it's important that we get like technologists in government, and we make technology more of one of the institutions of our country, technological literacy and awareness. Like, I think it's crazy if you think about it. I think of, I don't know, just playfully, amusingly, I think of Harry Potter, you know, the Ministry of Magic. Like, why don't we have this like thing in the government that's just like the technology, like the Ministry of Technology, like the Technology Association, like, you know what I mean? And then we have, like, I still remember this one news headline, or when McCain was running, like how he basically didn't know how to use a computer at all, like literally at all. Like, I don't think he could even check email, or maybe that was like the only thing he could do. And it's just remarkable if you actually did like a tech literacy test. And I don't doubt that there's like, I know the job of a politician is to not fully understand everything and be able to extract high level and govern off of that. But still, it's just crazy gap. Like, how can anyone be legislating, doing policy work, looking out for society, if they aren't intimately attuned with what technology is, right? What a beast that is. And like, we need like technology platforms in government to oversee this type of stuff, which, not to open up a can of worms about like corruption and like who should be staffing those positions and who watches the Watchmen. But I mean, even, you know, I don't know. I think the next wave, I think millennials entering office or in positions of power will be like the next big influx. Like, we are arguably tech savvy. You know, I think we're probably losing our grip on that a little bit as we mature and get older. I certainly am. You know, try to make a reel on Instagram. I'm like, what the heck does this work? You know, like, what the hell? But I don't know. Anyway, just, you're absolutely right. It's such a big phenomenon, that I don't know how you solve it other than incentivizing noble-hearted people to step outside of themselves, right? Like, there's sorry, I'll close with this, but in my domain of work, right, I work on designing application interfaces, and when you understand human psychology, you know how to make it addicting too, right? With the right color, the right little animation, like placing here to keep them in the app. And there's been a bit of a exit from a lot of designers and product people who said, like, look, like, there needs to be an ethical board overseeing this, because we are literally designing crack. And we like to tell ourselves it's for the greater good, or like it's so that people can use our app better and make their lives better. But if no one's overseeing this, like we're just hurting ourselves at large. So I think what's emerging as I'm talking more and more is just ethics, right? Like with great power comes great responsibility. Like, and how are we going to use it for good? Or
Technology feels like magic. You know, when you were talking about how we should have like, um, I guess some segment of the government, like, you know, like have the knowledge to kind of like make these decisions on the algorithm and on the technology and on what's allowed and what's not allowed. It feels like you're talking about like, you know, if humans discovered magic and we're like, oh shit, this is too powerful. We need somebody to like, you know, the magic can't fall into the wrong hands because it can be used for evil. And you know, maybe that's what like Facebook and Google and all that shit, you know, like the just like in a capitalistic society, that's what it turns into. You know, you program these things to be super addictive. Everyone has a cell phone now, and then you can literally tap into their brains just directly into their, I mean, not like Neuralink. Eventually, it'll probably get to that point, but like you can tap straight into my brain through my cell phone and what you send me on Facebook, you know, what notifications I get and the links I decide to click on and the stuff I decide to, and you like, you remember when they deplatformed Trump?
I was about to think, yeah.
And that was like and it should have been like, I mean, it was a big deal, you know, and a lot of people were like, yo, tight, like they deplatformed Trump. He's like, he's like, obviously you got to deplatform this dude. He's causing an insurrection. No. But like, what gets lost in the conversation there is who gets to decide that? Does Apple? Does Twitter? Does Google? Or does Facebook? Like, who gets to decide? Hey, yo, we can just deplatform this dude, and he can't talk to anybody at this point. Because at this point, like his Twitter account is worth more than like no one watches like, you know, the news the way that we used to. You know, like he could tweet something, and then you know, everybody in the world can instantly see it within 5 seconds. Versus like now he has to like, I don't know, put out a statement on YouTube, and then like it goes through whatever platform, and even then YouTube could deplatform his ass too if they wanted to, you know. Then how's his message going to spread? So like if the communication is controlled by, who gets to control that? Is it Twitter? I guess Twitter gets to control that one, but at that point, like, and don't get me wrong, like, you know, obviously I do believe if someone's causing insurrection, you know, they should at least catch some sort of Twitter suspension or, you know, whatever the case may be. But what got lost in the conversation was who gets to decide that and who should get to decide that. I mean, it's so powerful to be able to do that. Yeah, and I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
But I do think that got lost in the conversation, you know, because everyone was like, oh yeah, like awesome. Like what if Twitter decided to deplatform like Bernie Sanders because he wasn't like you know, about big corporations or whatever the case, you know, like what if he wanted to like tax the shit out of them and they were like, you know what, we're just gonna deplatform this guy so he doesn't win. Yeah. Like can they do that? I guess technically if they're a private corporation,
yeah,
then they should be able to do whatever the fuck they want, right? But it doesn't seem like it's I don't know. These are just questions that I think should be asked. I'm obviously not somebody that has the answers to it, so maybe we need that technological, like, you know, ethical board of people that we trust to be able to hopefully give better answers.
Yeah, no, it's a great topic, and I thought a lot of things when you're talking about it. It's a great topic in Kiwa, but I think a lot about how. So actually, I'll just open this with this question. It's tangential to this, but I think we can loop it back, which is, do you believe that access to internet is a fundamental right? Or has become, right? You know what I mean? Like, do you think it is now in the book of human rights?
I think if it's not there already, then it's like moving in that direction. So I want to say yes. without doing too much thought around it.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
a utility, like kind of like water or telephone and shit.
Right.
Is
But,
telephone considered was that considered like a right, or is it just something everyone had?
no, I don't even think water is considered a right. Right.
Well, I mean, water should be a right over internet, I think, perhaps in a society. I mean, because you need water. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's tough because like I mean we have a right to a inside society to like a base level of survival, but you know the U.S. has done a pretty poor job of that. Like we have people who are extremely impoverished, right? And literally hanging by a thread. Some people are like in crisis. Like there's humanitarian crises that are occurring in the U.S., right? In
Yeah.
certain pockets of America. So I think yeah, designating something as a right doesn't necessarily mean that we're doing it well. But I do think that some of these things are just like asymmetric, right, in their value, access versus value, because with just a small internet connection, like I mean, Chromebooks are like $100 some bucks nowadays, right? And with like you get Wi-Fi anywhere. Really, remember when we go to Asia, we just hop in from every cafe that had Wi-Fi. Oh, what's Wi-Fi? And what it unlocks for humans, just because it's unprecedented. We've never like the internet, the body of human connection knowledge is never ever, nothing, no resource ever existed like this ever. And so I would imagine that most people, even though they haven't maybe explicitly thought of it, would consider that a right that we should intentionally amplify and unlock. And there's many barriers to that, right now. Like we have these basically monopolies, like utility monopolies. And so where I'm trying to get all of this is that like when we talk about the whole rights of private corporations versus government versus people in those kind of spaces, the US answer to that has always been free market, right? Democratization of the market and the ability for things to float up, float down, right, based on sentiment but the structures of monopoly actually inhibit that movement, in that free movement of capital, free movement of ideas and solutions. So, but if we go from the bottom up, saying that okay, if everyone actually had access to internet, and basically the utility companies were spread properly, everyone could get internet, and then once they're in the internet, there are forums, spaces that they can tap into that are in balance to each other. And I think that's why this whole Facebook, Twitter, YouTube thing is problematic, is because there is no balance. Those are the de facto public squares for all of us. Like there's no way you can go, like that is the only channel to get to, you know. So there's a real question of access by letting private corporations do things like that, because that would materially affect like an election. It would materially affect all these sorts of outcomes because they hold way too much power. And I've always thought that one of my pet projects, dreams, would be like if I were to become independently wealthy, that I would create a Facebook that had like a ton of oversight, and the code was open source, and the government would like kind of oversee it with fixtures and backdoors in place to keep it. And then in this because I think Facebook and social network in a vanilla generic sense is actually a really great thing, just like a phone book, or you know, think about what Craigslist is, right? Craigslist is a weird outlier of this like public service that just has somehow resisted, just a virtue of the owner being like not about it, like resisted all of the corporatization. But almost something like a Craigslist, right? Where, and that could be some kind of buffer against all of like the Twitters and the Facebooks.
So
It would be interesting if that could happen. Like, I don't know, could you protect that?
So like, okay, so I think what you're trying to say is that certain things should be like a utility, like the way email is a utility. Like nobody owns email, but everyone uses email.
Postal service, socialized service, right? Yeah.
The problem is like, okay, after a certain like point, things start to develop like a network effect. You know what I mean? Like if I'm using Facebook and if all of our friends are using Facebook for the last like, 20, 30 years or whatever, and then the government comes out with government Facebook, then I'm probably not switching to that thing until I'm definitely not gonna be an early adopter of that. Let's say that it probably has to reach a certain point. Maybe you have to incentivize it to be like, okay, well, you get like a tax break or something, you sign up for it or something like that. But
well, imagine if you can pay all your bills and do all your DMV stuff and taxes and everything, right? Like, there's a lot of reform there you can do. But you're right. Yeah, point well taken.
It's tough because at what point do you I mean, or do you even like, can the government just be like, all right, Twitter's too strong now, time to make a government Twitter and just like go in there and do something like that? I mean, I guess you could.
I think
but
that, yeah.
I think he's what's the Twitter CEO's name? It slips my head.
Jack.
Yeah, Dorsey. Yeah,
Dorsey,
he's I think he's working on something like that. Because I think there was an idea in the beginning. I think Naval Ravikant was talking about this. He was saying that Twitter should have went the route of just being a utility, kind of like, hey, we are just a utility the same way email or phone is a utility. And in that case, we don't make any type of like, like if somebody is illegally using phones to like, I don't know, like buy and sell drugs, it's not on the phone companies at that point. They're just a utility. And he's saying that, Twitter should have went that route, but instead, Dorsey went the other route where they were like, all right, well, I guess people are going to say, pushing like liberal agendas or whatever the case. And so now they are no longer a utility. And he's saying that that's in the short run, it seems like maybe the, best thing for them to do, but he thinks in the long run, that was like a very haphazard move of them to do. But if they come out and say, we're just a utility, we're not going to touch anything, then he said that might have been the best thing for them to do. Now, I think he's working on some sort of like, oh man, I feel like I heard this on a podcast, like for maybe they were talking about it for like 5 minutes. So I'm definitely not making stuff up, but I think he's working on something like that. I forget what it's called. And perhaps it might be using blockchain where it becomes one of those things where it's just a decentralized platform, but Twitter. And then people just like kind of know the rules. And it sounds more like a utility than like a privately ran company, if you will. Kind of like Twitter, but not like with people that regulate it.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool. I'm looking forward to that because I just hope someone carries out on some of these like visions and ideas.
I wonder if that's going to work.
To your first point, I mean, I think that is historically what happens is that government says, all right, private sector, you do your thing. And it's like, oh God, wait, hold on. Like, this is all messed up. We have to come in and like fix it. And sometimes that means the government like nationalizes the industry, right? Or parts of it. Like, I'm sure that at one point there were like a bunch of private for hire police departments, right? And government was like, no, okay, we're going to take care of the police, or fire departments, right? And just anything that the government has decided to like nationalize. I mean, we have a national bank, right? There's still people today that like think that's like a fundamental like wrong, but I think that the government will have to do something for these tech companies for sure.
Politicians are so damn old though, and it's gonna take them so long to like the skills that got them into the seat of being a politician for like, like a lot of these guys were like career politicians, they've been there for decades. The skills that got them there are not the same skills that gets them to understand like technology. And I don't know if that means that at some point, like the younger generation that understands technology will be able to take over that faster. Because I mean, if you don't understand technology and someone else does, then technically you have like this pretty substantial inside track, you know, to overcome your opponent. But I mean, I don't know enough about politics to understand how that works. But like you said, like a dude like John McCain, you know, maybe doesn't know how to text or whatever. You know, at the end of his career, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. But I mean, these are the guys writing policy at this point. But I guess his role at the end of his career wasn't really like he was more like a symbol. A lot of people, but a lot of people
well, this is when he was running for government or for president.
Yeah,
at the time. So so it was a little bit earlier on even. But you're right. You're totally right.
But I would argue, like, you know, now, like, you know, in especially now, there's probably some people in politics now that don't know what the hell is going on in terms of like, you know, how the internet works. You know, like those congressional hearings that they always have with like, you know, Zuckerberg or Dorsey and stuff, and you hear like certain senators asking questions, and you're like, yo, does this guy even know how to use the internet? I think that happens often enough that you're like, holy shit, like this guy's making policy.
I think politics suffers from, and I don't even know if this is a formal like topic, but I'll just make it up, like just like this, the paradox of like expertise, you know, where you want people who are experts in a certain field or subject to be overseeing it, but that also comes with like incentives to do wrong, or to, you know, like that's the problem where you get a lot of these like industry folks. They're like, oh, they've done their legacy in the private sector, so they're like, oh, what do I do now? And there's always that inside track to either be a lobbyist or to run and then be on the inside. Then like, I think there is a word for it actually, that ping pong that people do between the aisles. And then, so then quote unquote, you have someone who's in a position of political power that knows the industry, but like, I don't know, is it at the end of the day, is that still the person that you want there? And so we just have this weird metric of like altruism that I think keeps escaping us in terms of identifying our leaders. And which also is a funny topic that I like to throw in a lot to happy hour conversations or coffee conversations with people, that I like to get everyone to agree to this, which is like the potential, like assessing the sociopathy, is that a word? Sociopathic like tendencies that a person like Obama must have needed, who like Obama, our mythical hero figure in the US like zeitgeist right now, but like acknowledging that that level of power had to come with so much utilitarian, like realpolitik, Machiavellian thinking, right? To maneuver your way up to that level. So that, and I always think about like sometimes what's my theoretical cap. So like, okay, if I was in a position where like I did have power and have want to try to do the best for a group of people, multiple group of people, and I'm sure you feel this when you're making policy for your workers, right? Your employees at your company. Like every step up the ladder comes with like having to try to, there's almost an assault on your internal ethics and morality and humanity that you have to somehow compartmentalize and keep intact as you keep making these like trade-offs. And I just can't imagine that someone gets to that level without having just whittled down their inner humanity so much, but there's something else there's something else that allows them to tap into that we regular people can't, right? Either we're completely taken over by it, and we lose sight of who we were when we started, or I don't even know. Like I think about what my theoretical cap is. I don't even think I could be a CEO of a company, right? Like that's like my theoretical cap. But like, you know, small startup with a bunch of friends, that's different. Like, but like when I think about like a, you know, anything bigger than that, I'm like, dude, I would just stop. I would be a robot, right? I would be like, yeah, cut that department. You know, lay off those 100 people. We have to save money. Like, I don't care.
Being
It's
CEO
gonna
of a company, being CEO of a company is an interesting, is an
like a mini
interesting.
god.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting position to be in. It's like you're trying to, and I think this goes back to the. I think earlier when we we're talking about religion and purpose, it goes back to the same discussion. You know, when we're talking about how your Muay Thai gym is almost like a religion, and like you know, you could say, like you know, like the head of your gym is like the Pope, and then you guys are a bunch of bishops and stuff. But you can also say he's the CEO, and then you guys are like kind of like the board of directors or the
Yeah,
C-level
VPs,
suite.
directors.
And then you
Yeah,
bring in like you know individual workers, and these workers like you know um they drink the Kool-Aid. They're part of your tribe now. They have similar core purpose, which is you know maybe to train Muay Thai and create a family environment. Um, you know, and through these actions, these core values, maybe work hard, you know, practice all the time, treat people like these are the core values we live by. And then our mission is to do this. And if we achieve our vision, then many people will learn Muay Thai and be better for it. You know what I mean? And you think about it that way, like, you know, CEO is kind of like, um, I guess like like you're trying to make this one entity act as a whole, where the sum of the individual parts is greater than the whole. But in order for it to act as one entity, you know, how do you get? I don't know how many people at your gym, but let's say you have like 100 people at your gym, or at HEH we have like 200 employees. How do you get 100 people to act as a whole? I mean, there's 100 separate entities. You know what I mean? Like in the human body, there's like probably trillions of cells. But how and individually these cells like you know don't add up to anything, but something holds it together and makes it like Hack or Steven. You know what I mean? And you're
yeah,
trying to do the same, but with like 100 individuals. Like how do you do that? Um, and I don't know. And nowadays, I mean, there's tons of books on it now. You know, talking about culture, and
hmm,
everyone needs a purpose, an aim, a vision. You know, company core values. Uh, what's your 10-year goal, 3-year goal? Like we're actually going through that right now at HGH. So um, it's like super interesting to think about. And it's kind of funny that the analogy you gave earlier was, oh yeah, the Muay Thai gym was like a religion.
yeah, yeah,
And then
yeah.
we opened with religions ran like corporations, and then now we're like full circling back. Oh yeah, I guess the CEO is kind of the person that instilled that you know this is what we believe here, this is what we do here, and these are the rules that we go by here.
Right, right. Yeah, I think it's so telling. This is really just a product of our Western perspective and upbringing. You know, that we've basically been like, yeah, like religion and corporations and all these like organized groups of people are just so fundamentally similar at the end of the day. I think they're more the same than they are different, I think. Um,
Companies
so
and religion.
yeah, just the way it's structured, and I think that that's one of my diagnoses for our modern society right now, which is that we've been hyper individualized. And that's just so much pressure on an individual person to be like a whole person, right? Like the pressure on a person right now to be like hustling, to be like meditating and working and have retirement and also go on a trip like vacations and have friends and like have love and romantic like whatever like all, I mean it's insane, right? Your identity is so it's asked so much more, and not only that, you're exposed to more people than you ever have, and you're only exposed to them in small bursts of time, which I'm like reliving now that society is opening back up. You know, I'm like, oh man, when was the last time I saw this person? Like, actually, how many times have I seen this person in total? And and it causes a lot of like, I think, yeah, like existential self angst and anxiety and worry. Whereas in the past, we had like sustained, robust, fortified relationships where you saw people, like, let's say right now, right? I see somebody, an acquaintance or a friend I see, well, like any number that you can say, 5, 10, 20, 100, times is like far less than what it used to be with people, where it's like, yeah, I saw this person every day when I walk down to the market. So I literally see them thousands and thousands of times, and like thousands of opportunities for small interactions and relationship building. And they know me. They have this like very resilient identity of me. Not much is going to change that, even if I like do something stupid, right? But like we're in this world now where like you mess up in front of somebody, that might be, 15% of your interactions with them, and it's like it significantly shifted their view of you one way or another. And we're just, and because of, I think we're lacking that like intermediate structure of like community, to like make people feel more grounded in a group identity. That's a group identity is so much stronger, right? It can take on so much more hits and stay there, and everyone is like feeding into it, building, supporting it, not in the same way that they're like feeding and building into your own identity, supporting yourself. And I think that's where there's a lot of allure for group identities at level, and I think a part of it is the like prescription for us to kind of to get through it, to help people out. So yeah, I think there's something there, and it should come no surprise that for a lot of people, work is their family, right? Because you see your coworkers more than you see your family on average. You just have so much time with them, and like, should it be work? Like, should we like maybe work shouldn't be that thing, and work. Don't get me wrong, work should be aspired to be as close to that as it can be, like, but I don't know if it's just like fundamentally mismatched. Like, that's where church communities and neighborhoods, I would say neighborhood communities are pretty important. Sports communities, whatever.
You know what's interesting? Shit, I think I forgot what I was gonna say. Hang on, it's gonna come back to me. Oh my god, dude, I literally just had this point and it was just like there, and now it's not there anymore. It'll come back to me. Oh yeah, okay. So you know how we're just like coming out of the other end of, I guess, this pandemic, hopefully. And during this pandemic season was the first time that a lot of people could work from home, where like it's like culturally accepted. Hey, like, I guess we're working from home now. And I think even though a lot of people are vaccinated and can go back in the offices, obviously not everyone's gonna go back into the offices the same way they did in the past. And some people might be remote forever. It seems like it's in that direction that some companies have decided that, I don't work for a company, so I don't know the culture around that, but I'm assuming there's gonna be a lot more work from home even after the pandemic's like declared over than there was beforehand. And I do think it's been determined that that's a net positive. But to your point about, group identity versus individual identity, like we're a hyper individualized society, and there's already less places to make connections and less places to like kind of interact with people nowadays, less community, like less like face to face, like human, like, I bump into you in the hallway, hey, what's up, Steven? How's your day type, like less chance for that connection to happen. What do you think the social implications, or perhaps a second or third order implications of work from home? What things can happen there that we're not aware of yet? Like now, it seems like a net positive. Seems like, well, obviously if Steven wants to work from home, spend more time with his family, that's a net positive for him. As long as he gets work done, net positive for us, like win-win, right? But is there anything anything there that we're missing? You know, as far as, okay, well, now that Steven's not seeing his team at the office anymore, you know, now that he only sees them on Zoom, this happens that we just didn't expect.
Wow, I love that question. I think it's a net negative, if I'm being honest with you. But I think it's a net negative based on the systemic inequality that we have in place already. Because it allows people to silo themselves even more. Because I think work from home is a privilege, right? It's something that's enabled to the upper class, right? Work from home. And you can see now the housing market has heated up, partly for many reasons, but part of it is like individuals on the upper end becoming location independent, right? And like now relocating to have you know, like places that are more like they get to pick more of what they want their life to be like, the people they want to be around, the things they want to do. And so I think it creates more of a bubble. Like I thought cities were good in that sense, right? Like as someone who's privileged, it's a growth thing and I invite it, but it's a very uncomfortable thing to actually deal with homelessness all the time when I walk out, right? Or mental illness, like it's in my face, like poverty, like it's literally 1 block away from me is like, honestly, the projects. I live in Southeast DC, right? I'm not embellishing here. It is what it is. And I can do this, one, because I'm young, but there comes in a person's life for every like city going youthful person that when they decide to have kids, that's usually the thing that moves them out of the city. Because I would not even want my kids to be close to some of this stuff. And certainly the school systems too, right? So I think that while there's so much good, don't get me wrong, on being able to work from home, I do think about how, like, as a society, we somehow do need to force a little bit more of people of different strata and demographics to interact with each other. Like, you know, like me walking down the street to get to a coffee, like I'm forced into that. But now I can actually go buy like a big ass house out in the mountains and be in my mountain community with people that drive like Subarus and wear hats like this and go kayaking on the weekends. And we all like, and every weekend we get wine, we go to a brewery. Yeah, you know what I mean? And that's just more echo chamber. And I get to like, and there's like this artificial flex of bringing like, honestly, a tech job, right? $300,000 salary to this like one local economy, which it might be good in that sense, but I don't know, it's just more, I feel like anything that entrenches us more into our class, it's just not the right direction for us. So, and it's so tough. And that's where I challenge a lot of our peers on, a lot of our peers who are a little bit more left leaning, to really consider the realities of mixing the classes together, right? If really, like most inequality most systemic inequality from my view stems from like keeping the poor people all in the poor people spot and keeping all the rich people in the rich people spot. And then like not letting those mix. But few people would actually want to do that. Once you start to live here and you're like, wait a minute, I don't want that in my neighborhood, right? So, yeah, that's my thinking on it.
No, those are huge. So net negative.
Not net negative. I'm not going to go that far. But
like there's implications there that we're not thinking about that are huge negatives, and maybe it doesn't outweigh the net positive stuff you know that can come from it. Like for instance, like if you guys need at your company, if you need, let's say like another programmer or something, and you're not limited by geographic location, then your company can be a whole lot more efficient and hire someone that's really good from somewhere else, and they're not limited by. So whatever your company ends up producing, like it's more efficient, effective, and there's a net positive there. And perhaps for the individual, it's positive because let's say they wouldn't have been able to get this job that's a more ideal fit for their skill set if they had to move, but now they don't have to move, so they can just, I don't know, just live in the Hamptons and still work from whatever they wanted to do.
Yeah. How do taxes work now, right? Like usually, like in a normal sense, I know that everyone who works for my company would all come from this area. We all eat the general same selection of food, same tax dollars, go back, same parks and things. Like the service, like the service industries that support our job as consumers, like when we buy lunches, coffees, that goes to them, taxes go back. But like now it's like literally you're just kind of sucking out like the resources from this community, from all these communities, and like redistributing them elsewhere. And then who doesn't see, like the people who don't short in the stick and don't actually see those returns, they don't see those tax dollars come back, they don't see consumer spending, investment come back, flow into their literally where they live, because money capital is so virtual and abstract now, right? That yeah, it's just gonna make it worse for and you're just gonna get this like ends of the extreme, like it's bimodal, right? For example, Asheville, North Carolina. I don't know if we've talked about it before. It's like the Austin of the East Coast. It's a weird, crunchy city, hippie city, right? I was surprised that that a hotel room there runs New York prices. It's like $300 a night, wow. 200 something, easy, right? And the housing, and first time I went was like 4 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. And the average time that a listing is on the market is less than a day. And you're talking about like this hippy dippy town up in the mountains, but it's because there was this thing that was already happening where tech people with outside salaries who could work remote and had the seniority and veteranship to do so they're like, okay, I have kids now, I value quality of life, I have the ability to leverage remote work, and so where else do I want to move? I want to move to somewhere that like I like being around nature. I like this, I like breweries, I like craft beer, I like coffee, I like this, so I'm gonna do that. But then what happened to that local economy was like everything just got pushed out to the extremes, and the only industry that existed was like service jobs to serve these like ultra rich that have like bought up all the housing, bought up everything. Like I think that with this whole last heating up of the housing market, I mean, you even have corporations and entities buying up properties. It's not just like individual buyers, by the way, right? It's not just like you wanting a house. It's like you meet all us guys pooling and then buying a bunch of investment properties. You don't turn that dial back. Like these are like mortgages. Like people buy up and hold real estate. Real estate, even after 2008, is still one of the most solid legacy investments you make. But also real estate is probably the biggest like indicator, I would say, inequality like in this country, like where you live and people not getting affordable housing in good communities, near like good facilities and resources are the number one reason why everything's like fucked up. You imagine being like 8 years old and being worried that a bullet's gonna fly through your bedroom window while you're doing homework. Like, can't quantify that. You can't. And so I think that's where like my work in the housing industry aligns a little bit about like social conversations that we have, because I think it goes back to housing. And I think remote work, there's a lot of implications there for where people decide to live now, and what living your job means, or what living in any like locale means.
So are we saying that, let's say for Asheville, before there was only like service jobs, but now they're like, I guess theoretically better service jobs because this whole like wave of people came that have a lot more money to spend. Is that a net positive for Asheville, or are we talking about like this as if it was a negative?
Yeah. So that's a great question. Really great question. And
like, do we want the Amazons and the Googles and stuff to come to our area. Makes the housing prices go up, but I mean, is that good? Like,
Yeah,
everyone's fighting for Amazon to come to their area.
it's a great question. I don't think there's an answer, honestly. Uh, I mean, yeah, I honestly don't. I don't know. And I think it's when I think about that, the example I brought up, it's less about whether, so like there's a floor in the ceiling, right?
Mhm.
And it's less about like, did it help the floor versus did it push the ceiling up to like high, you know? Like, for sure it probably helped the floor, right? It was an economic stimulus for that whole area that maybe like their normal industries like steel and mining, whatever, wood, like natural resource type stuff, fabrication is like waning. So it gave, they shifted into more of like that. But did it just maybe pull the ceiling up way too high now? Like those people, like that, the ceiling should never be that high. People shouldn't be like up there. And then,
Sometimes they make the floor so high on purpose that the people that can't get over that floor, even with the economic stimulus or whatever, that they have to get pushed out. You know, kind of like when you're talking about the conversation around gentrification. Like a lot of times they do that on purpose. Like in DC, they've been doing this for years. And I only know a very general idea of this, but like when they decide, okay, well, we're just going to increase the property tax X amount so that the people that live there can't afford to pay the property tax, so they have to move to PG County. So now the floor, it's like you have to be here, right? But imagine if you've been living in the same house in DC, you know, for however many for like 50 years, something like that, and all of a sudden they jack up the property tax to let's say before it was like 5K a year, and they jack it up to like 20K a year. Then the job that you have, you're not going to be able to cover that. Even if you own the house, you can't afford to pay that 4x multiplier on the property tax, and now you're forced to sell. I mean, maybe you sell for a decent price now because obviously if the property tax is high, it probably means like the value of the property has gone up. But at the end of the day, you're still forced to sell. And is that ethical? Is it ethical for you to just be like, all right, well, you know what, we want to like redo this whole block and make it like put a Mom's Organic here and put a Orange Theory or Core Power Yoga or whatever, and then value of everything goes up, but we're gonna have to take over some of these houses because this isn't like no one wants to do yoga next to a block with like
yeah,
these types of houses or these types of people even. I mean, I know I'm being very direct with that, but I think that's what people do think. That's why they gentrify like areas like that to increase the property of the houses. I mean, the value of the houses.
100%, yeah, 100%. And then property taxes being tied to school budgets is crazy too, which again, everything is basically the structures in place. They incentivize people to force people out, right? And to like create little pockets. Yeah, so I don't know. That's a tough one. That is a tough one. So there's another acronym that gets thrown around a lot, which is a NIMBY. You heard of what a NIMBY is?
What is that?
It's a pejorative. It's thrown around like a Karen. Actually, there's a lot of overlap between Karens and NIMBYs. But NIMBY is not in my backyard. It's just people who like are to this point, you're saying like ultra policing the neighborhood and community so that like
It's like get off my lawn type shit.
Yeah, right. But also like like let's say there's a new store, like you said, there's a new store that's trying to open or whatever, a new thing that's trying to open. And yeah, these are people who are like they advocate actively against like letting those types of things open around their community.
Huh. I never heard that term before.
Yeah, NIMBYs. So they're a big part of like any conversation around gentrification or like neighborhood rights and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, we had a lot of topics today. I
Yeah,
don't
we
know.
did hit a lot.
I don't know if you want to say anything to close. I know we're pulling up on 8 o'clock now, so you probably got work coming up soon. So
Yeah, let's close and do our retro.
all right, 10-minute retro. Let me stop the recording. No, stop this thing. Stop.